Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I'm your host, George Blitch, and I'm here with my right-hand man, my BDT, and co-host for today, Matthew Mitchell. How you doing today, man?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic, man. So, for those who are looking at the both of us right now, you might see that Matthew Mitchell is a familiar face here. We do a lot of stuff with Wild Game Series. We're interviewing a bunch of chefs, and we also have a bunch of mostly audio only podcasts because we'll be out at the ranch talking about our hunting experiences. And so this year, 2023, got off to a ridiculously amazing start. Matthew and I have been working throughout this entire year up until when hunting season started for us in October with our managed lands deer program. So we can hunt to the last day of September till the very last day of February. And so that very beginning of October, we went out there to the ranch with our friend Johnny Boots. Actually, it's Johnny Bolts now, right?
Johnny Bolts.
Yes, he
And
changes often.
yes, and he did join us. So George and I, the way we look at the entire year is we have what we call work trips, and then you have the hunting trips. And so pretty much every month we go out there for the work trips, and John was able to join. I think he actually started joining in July, if I
Yep.
remember correctly. And so he he was kind of scheduled, if you will, to be able to hunt with us in October. So we did our work trips, and now it's October, and all three of us are out there.
Yeah, and so the goal was to get him his first deer, his first large game animal. In fact, his first animal. He had been up until that time in July. He hadn't fired a rifle, hadn't fired a pistol. I think he'd had maybe a BB gun, and maybe some, stuff like that,
Yeah,
but nothing as far as like a true center fire or even rimfire rifle. So
yeah,
we got him in. I think we started him off on the 22, on your
I believe
22.
so.
Kind of, I
And
think we set up like the 25 or 50 yarder kind of.
yeah, we actually did a podcast at that time.
Yep.
So we can obviously you can go back and kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
hear how excited we were about his
yeah.
ability to shoot. I mean, he was
Jeez.
incredible from out the gate. And I
And
think he started with a 22 and then
yeah.
went straight to a 30-06 after that.
And I think he hit bullseye, bullseye, bullseye at 100,
Hmm.
bullseye at 200, bullseye at 300. And
Basically.
sometimes it's really about your mentorship and who brings you to the dance, that how good of a dance you're going to have. And I mean, I'm not going to pat ourselves on the back, but you know what I'm saying.
But boom, boom. Yeah,
No, he
exactly.
what was really cool about that, and we can talk about it in the podcast. So I won't go too much into it there, but the idea of when you're talking to someone, there's certain people who really they want to follow those steps and read about them ahead of time. So kind of like the idea of picking up your user manual for whatever thing you have, piece of technology, and reading it first, and so you have like an understanding when you bring it into play. He did such an amazing job of being able to really compartmentalize all that information, and whenever he got out and the way he was breathing when he was going to fire and stuff. So
Hmm.
I felt like for him and how he learns, that was a very important thing because he was just able to turn that on. So the first thing we do before we go on a hunt is to make sure our rifles are sighted in. So we went over to the bench. We each took shots, 100, 200, 300, make sure we're still on. All of our rifles were, so we knew we're ready. And I think we kind of were hoping to keep him under 200 for the first
Correct.
shot. I mean, I know growing up, 100 was where you started or under. And,
Yeah.
in a lot of places for the first time hunter, that seems to be like kind of, key.
But
And so,
the way he was showing he could shoot though, and just he has a calmness to him when in that situation. I think you and I already felt like 200 would be okay,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we talked a lot about hunting and a lot about the blinds and the situations you can be in, and we were talking a lot about like how to position the gun in the blinds, and like there was a lot of preemptive conversation for
Yes.
his comfort level. And so I think we even drove around some of the work trips, opened up some of the blinds and sort of set the rifles on and gave him sort of a test opportunity just to get a sense of what it'd be like.
And that's a great thing. I think that I had failed to do that with new hunters for many years until one day I kind of saw someone who was shooting off when, like on the bench, they were shooting perfect. I'm like, what's happening? And then I was like, I'm going to go look at their setup in the blind. And whatever it is, whether you have shooting sticks or things, you got to practice with how you're actually going to be performing, right? It's like you need to go and see that, especially if you're mentoring anybody, go and see how they're setting up. Oh, here's a suggestion: get this arm up here so you have a second level, and okay, put it in the corner of that so you have, different things that you're doing to make sure that someone has the most steady rest possible, right? So anyway, we go ahead and we do all that. And I think the thing we're also talking about, trying to, keep that under 200, obviously, and maybe even closer, is the idea that, when you have a live breathing animal in front of you, and, that the shakes that you could get, we just don't know what he's going to perform like when it's a live animal versus a target, right? It's his first one. So we kind of set up, and we went and took him to the colorblind. And that one was one that, I think there's a feeder that's about 162
It's 160.
yards, I think. Yep.
Yeah, 162.
And it's fenced in. So we have those. We used to have a protein feeder in there. Now it's just corn, but we had fenced it in to keep the hogs out. And, every now and then you get a big hog that'll get that one little corn that's knocked down. But that was something that we knew. We had corned the roads. And so in there, you kind of have a V looking out, and then you have two on your far right and far left at kind of your 90s. So you have you basically have a really good swatch of 4 different lanes in between. If you've got the V in front of you, the right V, and then the far right lane, in between the middle V's is you have a pond. So there's a lot of action coming in. You can see about 200 yards on the middle V, and then on the far right and left, you're about like 300, visibility, but you got some high grass and stuff there.
I was gonna say the way we cut it this year, I think pretty much every shot was 200 or in basically.
And we try to usually
when I say
extend
cut
that
it
out.
like the grass and everything. Yeah.
And it's tough though, because we had issues with a tractor being down, and we had issues with, a mower and all sorts of stuff to where we couldn't really mow as much as we wanted. But what was really cool, and we kind of been talking about this too, is that certain areas we had mowed earlier, like way at the very beginning of the year. And so you got the big brush, and then you have almost like this medium high grass is maybe 3 or 4 feet. And then we have the stuff that was mowed, and it kind of gave that transitional buffer zone that a lot of animals stopped in before they came out into that. I really liked hunting with that,
Yeah, because I think it even slowed that. I ended up seeing like a rather large buck somewhere, maybe 5.5 years old, 6.5 years old. And it actually gave me probably another 5 to 10 seconds with that buck, because he did sort of slow down in that transitional zone. And so if that was the right moment for me to pull up the gun and put the scope on everything, I had a little bit more time there. And that was kind of nice, because with those big bucks, or let's say a pig or even a predator coming through, they move fast, and you have to be ready, and they're not just going to wait for you at all. And so you're in a window of 15 to 25 seconds most likely, if not less, and so that transitional zone was really interesting, because it definitely slowed down every animal. I whether it's pig or coyote or deer, all of them slowed down because of it.
No, it was really neat. In fact, I remember I talked with Lindsay Thomas, who's the chief communications officer, I believe it is, CCO with National Deer Association. And we talked about that particular thing. Like when he was saying, one of the big benefits is being able to have this buffer zone. He had a particular name for that kind of thing between your big woods and then, your open areas. But we got to see that, by default of, not being able to get everything mowed. But I think that's something that we'll continue to do.
Absolutely.
In future years. It seems to be a nice little, kind of buffer there. But, getting back to the hunt there. So I went up, he had gone with you the first 2 hunts.
That's right. And one of those hunts, we actually had a nice doe. She was inside the feeder pen, basically. And, it was his first time putting the crosshairs on a doe. And, I think he felt good at some points and didn't at others in terms of comfort level. But he had 20 minutes with that doe. And, I'm only giggling because like I would have, this has probably been my first time too, doing the same thing, where now like 20 minutes seems like an eternity with a deer to have in front of you. But, I said, if it's not right, don't do it. We've got, this is your first night. This is the first. I mean, this is your first hunt, and we have another 5 or 6 coming up on this trip. So just continue to put the gun up and keep doing, keep practicing, going through the motions, and just get comfortable. Don't pull that trigger until you're comfortable and ready.
Yeah, yeah,
And so we finished that hunt. No shot was fired, but I think he was able to kind of learn a few things in that moment for when he sat with you after those 2 hunts with me. I think that's when he was probably finally really truly ready.
yeah, yeah. Well, and it's funny too. Remember we got back to, he said something about, he's like, I don't know, I also didn't want it to be over so quick.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know,
He wanted to
and it's
enjoy more time.
what's that old adage, like, don't pass on the first day that you wish you'd had on the last. Like,
Yeah.
it's this idea that, but it happens to a lot of hunters too. It's like I've had that happen too, where it's like, well, okay, that's that, I was planning on getting one big buck and it showed up early, and it's like,
Yeah.
huh, that was the first hunt, first 15 minutes. Like, did
But
not
that
expect for it to go that way.
but that deer's down.
A deer's down.
That deer's down though, because you
That's
can't
the good
you just
feeling
never
too.
know. You can't pass it up.
Yeah.
But
So, it's funny because, when we go on our longer hunt here, when we go to South Texas and we kind of have, 5 days where it's, you're like that, you might see a coal buck or something that we're looking at, like, maybe, but what might happen tomorrow? And it's just, sometimes you don't ever get back to that opportunity, even for, a deer that might be at that age class or that size or whatever it is. I mean, we're trying to fill freezers with as much meat as possible, but
yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things you got to, kind of compute it. But it's good because we knew we were seeing a lot of deer, and I think it's good that he got comfortable with that idea. So, that third hunt, he came in with me, and I brought in my good camera, and I was gonna try to film his first hunt, hoping that someone would show up. And we got out there, and I think we were probably about an hour in, and we're texting back and forth. I think you were starting to see a little bit of movement, and then we were seeing some stuff, and then a group of doe were over at the feeder, and then there were some that were coming out from the other side. It was all in this kind of like center left lane, and we're seeing a lot of action there. And before you know it, it's like they all kind of were congregated out in the road, and right on the edge of kind of the woods there. And I guess that'd probably be about 150 to 160 yards there where it was. And so this one that, there were two doe, and one was bigger than the other. And it was coming out. It had a little weird gait when it was walking. Couldn't see an injury like externally. So it's not like, there was some wound or something like that, but it definitely had some, maybe it had hurt its hoof or something, or maybe it was something higher up, but
But the one that had the gate, are you saying that was the bigger of the two?
yeah. Cause
Okay. Yeah.
that's the one that I was like, you should go for that one. And he's just
Right.
like, Yampy. And y'all, we all have to play the audio commentary because
I think you should.
we're
I really think you
recording
should.
this part. Yeah, maybe I'll do like a pause here and go. But
Yeah, it's so funny.
it is hilarious. He's like, I don't know about shooting Gimpy. Gimpy for my first deer. And I was like,
As if there's something wrong with the gimpy deer in terms of the meat or whatever. It's just hilarious.
It's tainted.
Tainted.
It
No,
was
I
all
can't do it.
so freaking funny. And I'm sitting there, we're giggling, man. We're like, because I couldn't keep straight. I'm sitting there trying on the camera, being like all professional. It's like you're laughing at him.
Yeah.
Or with him. And so yeah, we ended up, eventually it was like he was about to take the shot. I hear the safety go off. He's like ready, or he's about to take that shot. And then there were two young, maybe 1.5-year-old doe, if memory serves, that are off on one side, and they kind of come in, and then they get right in front of the deer he's going for, old Gimpy.
Once
And
he's finally getting settled on the idea. And
yeah,
then
and
it's
it's
like,
like
oh, there's
he's
these
like, oh no,
deer
I'm
in
like,
front of him.
wait. It's like,
Yeah.
and he knows it too. It's like,
Yeah.
but I just externally said it. But he's like, we're waiting, and then eventually that deer passes, and so it's like, okay, green light, and he fires a shot, and that thing, you can see it take the hit, kind of spin around, and then run off into the woods, and they all kind of run off in the woods. And we're like, whoa, okay. Well, then that's kind of when the clock starts, right? So we like to give them at least 30 minutes before we're going and looking for, the animal that we've shot, right? Unless something falls right over. And then, it's still the first thing you do, reload, get back on there
Yeah.
in case it tries to get up again. Because I've known cases where it's gotten up, walked off, and no one ends up with anything, and might end up with a wounded animal, which is the last thing we want. So
real quick, what was it? He He fires the shot, and
Hmm.
like I think any person who hasn't hunted very much or first time shooting an animal, you put the crosshairs on, you pull the trigger, but you just don't know if you hit it because you're just not experienced enough to like kind of know that you hit the animal. What like team? How what was his reaction afterwards, and like how it like like just his body language, like what was he like in that first 10 minutes after the shot?
I think there he kind of he didn't have like the shakes or anything. He's like,
Yeah,
I can't believe that just happened. And
yeah.
then one of the things that I was like, how did you feel about the shot? And he's like, I felt good. I was like, I could see that the animal was hit the way it kind of,
Oh,
there's
so
some
he did see
signs.
it.
Yeah, I did. I don't know if
Oh, you did. Yeah,
I,
got it.
I can't
Yeah,
remember if he fully saw
yeah,
it. I think he's like, he felt like it was good. So at least
yeah,
he felt the setup was good. Whether he kept the scope on it or whatever else, I can't really fully recall.
yeah.
And that doesn't matter because it was gone pretty quick and he saw it run off. So, but I think he might have picked his head up after and kind of saw it run off.
Sure.
And I was like, reload, and kind of, because I think that first time you're shooting too, you're kind of like, whoa, that just happened. You're not trained to necessarily like shoot, put another one in, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so it's like just in case it comes back out or whatever, or goes that next lane. So I'm kind of leaning back too because of how we're kind of set up in case it comes out in that other lane. And I got my rifle at the ready too in case it goes far right and I need to take a shot for him because it'd be harder for him to get it over me. So we're kind of all prepped and whatnot for any situation there. But
Yeah.
then we realize, there's no deer moving.
Hmm.
There's nothing out. We can't see anything. Nothing is crossing the road. So it's like, okay, we think it ran back behind the pond, which then would not give us a view because if it ran kind of behind that right V that we're on, he shot on the left V, and so if it ran behind the pond, we wouldn't be able to see it because we only have visual to about 200 something yards, and so it would have been behind that. So again, we're like, okay, and I'm like, well, we got the camera here. Let's rewind and let's take a look at what just happened. And we rewind and we're looking at the footage, and to me and to him, when we slowed it down, it looks like the shot is behind his intended area, which was heart lung, and that it was maybe a gut shot.
Yeah.
And then that timer resets. So for those who maybe know or don't know, rather, if you have a gut shot, it could still be a lethal shot. It could still be a mortal shot, but it may take longer for that animal to die.
Yeah.
So, you shoot a heart shot. I mean, I shot a heart shot before in a deer right in the center heart, and it still walked 100 yards before it fell over. And I mean, it was bleeding the entire way, basically bled out. And that was a heart shot. You would think heart shot, boom, down. No,
Yeah.
not always the case. Lungs, too. Sometimes they may run 100 yards. It's like adrenaline, all the things that are going through their body, right? So even though their ticker's gone, well, with that being a potential gut shot or something a little further back, maybe different, organs there, we decided we'd give it more time. And so, keep looking back at this footage and it's like
Doubt starts to
it's,
creep in probably a
it's,
little
it's
bit.
like, then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, it looks like it back here and the way that the body folded and man. And so we waited. So normally would be 30 minutes,
Yep.
click, going down, right?
Yeah.
And if it runs off, and that way it's given time to expire. And um, I guess around that 40-minute mark, I think we're going to maybe try to push to an hour because the weather wasn't too bad to where,
Yeah.
it wasn't going to be like immediate spoilage. It wasn't like it was, super hot. And so right around that time, I'm looking out and I start to see some deer funneling out of the right V, and probably about 220 yards are coming out of the brush, and they're starting to just stay along that brush line, which is about 200 to 218 yards there, depending on where we are on that visual. And you probably got about maybe a 75-yard swatch of space you're looking at, and I see uh, decent sized doe come out, and then
Hmm.
right behind it, I see a very dark doe, which is a melanistic doe, and there are about 7 or 8 counties in Texas where the deer are about 20% abnormally dark, and they have a lot of melanin in their system. So melanism, when you think about albino, right, it's very easy to think about, oh, it's a white animal, right? Or lewistic, and like there's it's a lack of color for the most part that you're seeing, right? Well, with melanistic animals, melanism is a trait where the coloration, the tissue, everything is colored darker, so that hair is dark. I mean, we're talking chocolate brown, like black. It's dark, dark. And so for
Very
those who don't
different
know,
looking
very different, very different. And
deer. Yeah, it's just very different. I mean, very obvious that wow, that is a very dark animal, you know.
and we've seen some before. And in fact, in on
I mean, we
November
knew
11th,
this one was here.
we knew
The
this one
one,
was here. We saw
yeah.
it 2 years before as a younger one.
Hmm.
Last year we saw it and had crosshairs on it. It's 2.5.
I saw it
When
the night before.
you saw it the night, that's
I don't know
right.
if you remember that. Yeah. So
Yeah,
the
yeah,
night,
yeah. Let's bring that back in real quick.
yeah, the night before we were sitting in the same stand and hadn't seen really anything. No, I'm sorry. That was the same night that it was the first hunt that Johnny and I had.
Yep.
And after the deer went away that he was potentially going to shoot, there was in the right lane. I mean, we're past sunset. We're into the like last 5-10 minutes of shooting light. And I knew it was for doe. I could tell it was for doe just by the silhouette. You if you're out there long enough, you can tell the difference between the silhouette of a pig and a doe or a deer. But where I had no confidence was like, is that one in front or behind, or like how are they positioned? Because the way they were feeding in that lane, so their necks were crossing each other. But I
Yeah.
could tell one of those doe was significantly darker. And
Yeah.
so I knew what I was looking at. There was no way I was going to shoot with that little of confidence of where I could intentionally put a bullet, right?
Yeah.
And so, very neat to see, but there was a high likelihood that she was going to be in that same area. And fast forward to the next day, the next evening, when you guys are sitting there, indeed, they actually came a little sooner than they came the night before.
Yeah. And that was and the way they came out, they didn't go to corn. It was like they're
Yeah.
probably, maybe they're coming into the water there too in that pond, or maybe they're
Hmm.
just crossing the property there, but they kind of came towards us and then did like a 90-degree turn along that brush line too. They weren't coming out and feeding in any area there. And, you know, I was kind of the idea of like melanistic animals on the property. We've seen a buck before. We've seen a lot of melanistic deer, but one of the
Yeah.
which I had an occurrence with was in 2016 on Veterans Day. I ended up taking a very mature buck that we dubbed Black Beauty, a melanistic buck there too, 10 point. And so there's a story I've written about it too. You can go to the sonofablitch.com website, look at writings, and there's that there too. Maybe I'll put a link in here as well. But that kind of talks about an experience of seeing them around there and talks a little bit more about them. And so we've had many sightings over the years, and there's been some, mature doe that we've hunted for, but they just never showed up. So this one, we decided at 3.5 years old, we would take it. One thing that's interesting and something that hopefully we'll be looking at more is that in melanistic doe, I've never seen one with a fawn ever, no matter what age class over the last, 12 years of being
Yeah.
observing these, not a single time. So I don't know if they're, sterile. Like, I don't know if they're not producing. A lot of times other doe will push them away. I don't know if bucks feel the same because they look different. Maybe it's like, I don't know what it is about that, but we saved a bunch of tissue samples. I've talked to Jim Heffelfinger, who's, wild game biologist, helping with the Arizona Fish and Wildlife there. He's, I think that's the name of what they have, but he's, one of the main men in this arena. And so he's like, make sure you save some stuff. So hopefully we'll talk to some people, maybe we can get some, genetic samples that we can send out to the right people and figure out more about it. But again, here's this doe coming out. It's no fawns with it. And that's one of the things, we will never shoot a doe with the fawn. We want to give the fawn a chance, to be able to make it on their own. So at least at 1.5 years old or whatever, that's what we see a lot of them running out on their own. So I immediately recognized this is the one that's, 3.5. And so I'm getting the camera really quick set up for the shot. And then I kind of make sure that I'm looking over at kind of the side of my eye, camera is where it needs to be. And there's another doe in front of it. And it kind of like steps out and to where I can see the whole doe. And I've got my crosshairs ready to go, safety's off. And then I see the doe that's next to it take one little movement forward. And I'm like, I don't want it to run off because they're both kind of being a little sketchy.
Yeah.
There was some hogs, that we had seen right after, just very shortly after Johnny had taken his shot at his doe. And so I was like, I don't know if they're spooked, if they're about to run. I've heard some coyotes. It's like and all those things in your mind, like I need to make the shot now, but I want to make sure that I'm making the right shot. So
Right.
I was steady. That doe made that one little flinch move, and then I just fired. And I could tell immediately, I could see through the scope that it took the hit. I was like, okay, it's hit. And then it ran almost like this weird, almost like a question mark shape around, and it had definitely hit the front, and its legs were kind of it was like almost like a wheelbarrow. It was running by, and then it just dropped, and so it kind of ran towards us and hit the ground. And
Well, what was wild is you caught it on camera. I think you happened to have the camera up and running, and you were filming those doe, and then it's like, oh, okay, wait a minute, there's the melanistic doe, and you sort of left the camera in place on the doe, made the shot. And what's wild is in the video, you can see the doe is hit, and then she runs to the left side of the frame, out of the frame, and then all of a sudden, like much more forward and coming from the left frame across the right frame, and where she was like, running but struggling to run, but it was really, it was like out of frame and then back in frame. It's like it's kind of a neat video. But that's, I think, what's more incredible, the most incredible thing about that entire moment is you actually got it on film yourself.
Yeah.
Like that, like that's kind of hard to do. I
I
mean,
know a lot of people that self-film too. Like I saw, a video of Jim Shockey, who he's also been on the podcast. He's got his book Above Me Here, Call Me Hunter, great book.
Yeah.
And he's like self-filming, and I know that there's folks who do it too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But it was something that kind of happened real quick because I'm looking at the time ticking down, like, okay, we're about to get out. I'm not thinking, because it's starting to get darker, right? And so I'm thinking we need to get out there and try to see with a little bit of light that's left to see if we can find some blood sign and go after this. But again, we wanted to, it's like don't want to pressure the deer and bump it in case it's expiring slowly, and sending that search on to a more difficult task. And so when we see that's the melanistic doe, it's down. It's like without a doubt. And so then I'm like, oh, like my goal was to try to get pictures of the daylight with Johnny and his doe. But again, it's like now I'm not really sure the status of his. I know mine's down. Let's go over there and let's get some pictures with the melanistic doe, because it's light. It's a very rare thing to have happen.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, and Johnny got it too.
He's like, okay, cool. I mean, we went out first and we're like, oh, and I was like, oh, let me get my good camera. Ran back up to the blind and came back and let's like try to set it up. And I'm looking at him like, okay, go over there and get by the doe. And so I'm kind of trying to figure out how to frame it because I was like, I don't know how well he knows how to operate cameras. And I was like, I'm just going to get it on regular autofocus stuff. And I was just like, you just keep clicking. And, and so like we're taking pictures and stuff, and I feel like I've got a good framing, and I'm like smiling and doing the whole grip and grin. I'm very excited, but I'm like trying to get the quick pictures quick before the light's fading. And then I'm like, okay, we're good. I figure one of these, whatever, 40 or 50 pictures he took is probably good. And that is when I was like, I finally recognized like I don't need to get the picture now. I'm done. I've got it. Right. Yeah. And so he's still sitting there behind the camera, and I kind of put my hands down on the deer and I'm saying my thanks, kind of a prayer of just appreciation for this moment and the fact that there's lightning has struck twice, the second melanistic animal or second melanistic white-tailed deer. It's pretty like there's big feelings going on. I'm just like, wow. And I'm not even recognize this later, but then we get back and was reviewing the photos. Johnny took a couple pictures of me in that moment. And those are the most, you and I were looking at those photos. You're like, that's it. That's the one right there. That's it. Because it was unintentional. I wasn't posing and trying to, or looking serious or whatever. I'm trying to figure out what might be good in case, because I'm going to write an article about it. I wrote an article, got published in a few different magazines. So I'm already thinking in my mind, I want to get a good picture to go along with the article. All right. Right.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
make it interesting. And we got live pictures over the years and stuff too. So I got some good video. I got some, you know, pictures of this deer beforehand, in previous years, previous sits. So it was that one that, you know, I'm kind of have my hands on it. I'm in prayer. And I was like, I'm so glad he took that
Oh, it's
picture. I'm so glad.
so
It,
good.
that that
It's a,
exemplified so
well,
much.
something you put on your wall, show up in a
Yeah.
magazine, you know, I mean, it's the moment, you know, so
Yeah. No, really, it really, that was it. It was the moment.
yeah.
And that's when I could actually like let it all in. And that's when I was like, this just happened,
Yeah.
because it's kind of like, you know, there's a certain point where whatever you're taking, whenever you put your hands on the animal, really, and like, or and you know, the photos are done or whatever, it's like, you're like, oh my gosh, like it's hitting me. This experience just happened, whatever it may be. Or maybe it's when you walk up to that animal the first time, you're like, it is down. Oh my gosh. So we're like, wow. And you know, we get you, and we're like, okay, we're gonna go look for
Hmm.
Johnny's deer. And then we realize, like, we're not finding any blood, like, at all. And like, oh no. And
Yeah. More doubt sets in. Yeah.
you know, and you know, maybe you can talk to this too as well. It's like, you know, because you've had this experience enough now too. It's like whenever an animal's shot in an area and you're like identifying the area where it was, or we were able to look back on the camera too. So we're like, okay, it was here. It was in this spot in front of these cactus. And we kind of pinpointed that, took a little screenshot with our phones too. Like, okay, yep, there's that cactus. Okay. But then what are we looking for as far as trying to figure out a pathway of where we might start our search if there's no blood?
Oh, if there's no blood, I mean, essentially you work your way to a grid system, right? And so you're going to enter, or what it seems like we tend to do even before the grid search is we have kind of an idea of where it entered the
Mm-hmm.
woods, right? And then you start to look and you're trying what when you get into the woods, what's nice is that you have limbs and you have other things that are more at the height that the deer can brush against. And so you really start looking for blood at not on the ground, but at a higher level as well, like a couple
Mm-hmm.
feet up. And then you're looking for the game trails and you're looking for the blood on those game trails. And then you're kind of scanning around to see if you see a white belly. And you just kind of layer yourself in a bit. And then when you get to a certain point where that is not really working out very well, the main highways have no blood, the little secondary trails have no blood, and you've kind of done, maybe 20 or 30 feet in every direction on those main trails, then you kind of get into grid mode. And then you just sort of, like I think you and I, on this particular trail, about 50 feet in, we were onto a major sort of drainage that leads to an adjacent tank. I mean, the or
Yeah, it's got a
pond or
creek
whatever.
bottom. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a creek bottom, but it was
Mm-hmm.
dry,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so we got down in there, and so I think we were both like instinctually, both of us were kind of going in different directions. Um, Path of least resistance kind of thing, and I think you saw me go to the water, so yeah, I think water can be a source where they're going to go, maybe go to die, or like it just, like it's just somewhere they can tend to go. Excuse me. And so like I kind of went down towards the water and started walking around, and all of a sudden I hear, found it, found her, and so I hear found her, and so I go back up the creek bed, and she had kind of done the opposite. She just she went upstream, and it was the path of least resistance for her. And you know, um, very odd uh, to it's real odd when the deer are shot correctly and there's no blood trail whatsoever.
And that was when we got there and saw the deer, he shot it in the heart.
Perfect. It was perfect.
Like
And
it
actually, I know because I helped him clean
Uh-huh.
the animal. He clipped the top of the heart.
Right.
Yeah.
And got both lungs.
Uh-huh.
So that's the thing, that had we not been fooled by looking at a video, thinking that it was hit further back, we would not have given it over 30 minutes. We would not have had that run in with that melanistic doe.
Uh-uh.
So it's a very strange thing. It's like, I thought we had video evidence of what happened. The video evidence is the thing that threw us off, because if we didn't have
Absolutely.
that video, we would have been down there in 30 minutes, because I was like, this guy's shooting well. He says he shot it well. And he did. He hit it right where he's supposed to do, but there was no blood. But then, like, the exit hole was, about the size of a baseball. Like, it was very weird, like how that happened. And, it's, I
We
don't,
thoroughly look for blood. I mean,
yeah,
and what's crazy is the wound was as if there should have been blood squirting the whole time on
should have
its
been.
journey to where it went and laid down, but
And I even
it,
tried to backtrack from where we saw it, areas around it, looking for blood,
nothing.
just to study. And it's like,
Yeah.
what happened here? I don't understand. But again, everything's strange. Nothing ever happens the same way twice, and you just never
Yeah.
know. There's no explanation sometimes of what happens and how, other than,
And we
it's like, we
and
found
we
it.
found it. We found it,
Yeah.
and
Do you
the
remember I found
relief.
I found a shed antler right next to it. So I kind of put it up when you walked up, and you're like, huh?
Yeah, I walked up and internally I'm going like something's not right. Why did he no, that's not. Yeah, okay, that's a shed. Yeah.
Yeah.
It took a few steps, but
George
in
is
my
a
head.
joker.
But yeah, it was we did what every group of hunters should do for a guy who shoots his first, or a gal who shoots their first deer, is we let him drag it out.
Yep.
He dragged it all the way out, and we got some good pictures, and you could just tell the relief set in. He started
Yeah.
joking around and just started
Yep.
having he was just at ease. And I've been there. I know that feeling. I mean, we've been on the worst side of that, like where you never find the deer,
Mm-hmm.
and but more often than not, we they're there, and you just have to take your time and look and just do your due diligence, not get not panic or freak out or anything. And yeah, and so we I think the cigars came out at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they did. There was a celebration, and kind of sitting around and kind of getting them up on the skinning racks and
Hmm.
getting everything prepped. And then there was like that moment of like, oh my gosh, this just happened. Like, and some pictures where I'm next to my doe, he's next to his, and it
Yeah, we
was
took some great photos of, like, I think you have some of mine where they were on the Polaris laying next to each other, because that's how
yeah, yeah,
we
yeah,
set them up there on the hood just
on
to
the
get
hood,
them
right?
back. And just side by side, you could really see the difference in the fur. And then when they were hanging, the same, same thing. But
Yeah,
there's some really great photos that that help you understand like how dark that deer really is.
absolutely, absolutely. And there's other melanistic deer that we've seen out there that kind of have a lighter shade, and like I said, that in those areas too, there's 20% of the deer population has abnormally dark coloration, right?
Hmm.
And that's a very unique thing. It's like, we just have that there, but this one was very much, I mean, it's almost black. It's the
Yeah.
so chocolate brown black. It, like, that would be the combo color I'd describe it as. And the one that I had taken in 2006, the buck, was very similar in that coloration. We have some that are a little bit dark, a little bit lighter. Like, you can still tell, like, but it's like just kind of a chocolatey color. And again, it's just, so you never know what you're going to see, but you see that kind of come out sometimes, and unless they're with other deer, you might think like, what is that? It's
Yeah.
like, looks like a different species. It just completely, it'll throw you off. I've seen pictures of people like, that's not real. I'm like, no, I assure you it
That's
is.
real. Yeah.
It's I did not Photoshop this. I'm not that good.
Yeah.
But it does look like a different animal altogether. It really does. And and that's, you see that with piebalds, listic,
Hmm.
you see albino. There's a lot of different colorations of deer, of animals altogether. I mean, I've seen melanistic coyotes, and I mean, just any kind of animal you can imagine, squirrels, there,
Totally.
everything there is that. And again, hopefully we'll find out, through some science and research and working with the right people a little bit
Yeah.
more about that. So we can send in those samples. And
I'm really excited for that to, all that information to come back
yeah,
and to kind of and to see genetically what the differences are and if there's more insight. I'm also really excited. Johnny's first doe, his first kill, is forever tied to this moment for you with this melanistic deer and that whole story about melanism in the county and your history with that. And
yeah,
we have it's really amazing to kind of get another person into the fold because you can go back and listen to podcasts from last year when we're in South Texas, and George and I have some really interesting synchronicities on some bucks that we shot down there. And now this is another moment where there's some special events kind of tied together. And it'll be really interesting as Johnny kind of continues his hunting career, like what other synchronicities and what other kind of events that can be shared between us that'll happen. I can look forward to that camaraderie and that continued connectivity.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think I also I look at that too, and it's a paired memory. Like I don't. It's like, oh, the melanistic. It's both, because
Yeah,
one would not happen without the. I mean, the melanistic wouldn't happen if we didn't wait. If we weren't tricked by our visual
sure.
of
Yeah.
this video of like, oh, he didn't make the best hit. We did, and it was spot on. And but the video made it look like it was off. And so again, like if that didn't happen, we wouldn't have waited, never would have saw the melanistic. And maybe you or I would have saw it the next day. And I was kind of hoping you were going to get it during that trip, because I wanted to kind of have someone else have that experience, and that I could kind of be the witness on that, instead of like I've had the experience. It's like
Yeah,
I've,
but
I've checked
my
off the
feelings
once
on
in a lifetime. I know your feelings.
yeah, my feelings on that. I feel like there's something to you shooting that deer too. I won't get into it. There's a lot to cover on that, but
Yeah.
it's just one of those things where I think it set itself up right. I think it was the right everything happened the way it was supposed to. So
And I would not disagree there. And
mhm.
I think that hope is that, like, the same thing that I always want someone else to experience what I've
Sure.
experienced,
Yeah.
because it's like I want someone to get their first deer. Recently at our ranch, Meg's cousin, David, his son Aiden, got his first buck, and it's like it's a buck we've seen. You and I saw it in person, and like it was one that he ended up taking, during the hunting season
No,
here, and
that
it's
was the
like
one we were
how,
talking about
yeah,
earlier in this
yep, and
podcast,
yeah,
the 5.5-year-old who
and he got it,
came.
and
Yeah, it's
what a
amazing. Yeah.
great first deer. I mean, I
Oh,
cannot think of a better
incredible deer.
first
Yeah.
deer. And Johnny, when we were talking with him, he's like, yeah, I'll start with the doe and work my way up. And it's like, I can't wait for him to get his first buck. But the
Mhm.
firsts, nothing replaces that, right? There's no,
No.
that is something that you will always remember, that first animal that you take, whether it's, in each category, right? Deer or hog or coyote or whatever. You got your coyotes. So like all the different things that you will never forget those things. They will always be seared into your memory. And so I was so happy to be with him
Yeah.
when he got his first. The fact that we got to get it on
Likewise.
video, that we
Hmm.
got the setup recorded, to have that memorialized like that too, because I didn't have that growing up. I have some pictures of it, when we were skinning it, a couple grip and grins when I got that. So I have those in my first year for sure.
Yeah.
And then we did a shoulder mount. My dad and mom decided they would go ahead and take care of that. And so it's there at the ranch in South Texas, from that first one. So I still have that visual reminder, but having a video and that technology and all the pictures we took, and it's like I saw the other day something that Mark Kenyon, who runs Wired Hunt podcast, is part of Meat Eater. He's also been on this podcast. He talks about, he's like, if you take that, experience and you've gone, you got the hunt, take your time. Take 500 photos if you want.
That's right.
Soak in that moment. Get all the memories. You've earned that time. And a lot of people are like, oh, I can't believe you're taking a picture of that deer. It's not the thing that people are doing for. It's the experience, the meat that they're sharing. It's not the end all result isn't to have this picture you can put on social media. That's not it. That's the end of it. That's the after, right? It's like that
It
for us, it's a part of it, and you should
Yeah,
keep it as
1,000%.
part of it, and you should celebrate it and take your time. If you want to take 5 more pictures, take 5 more pictures. You know,
And that comes back to the way we started this podcast, right? We mentioned, oh, the work trips, and Johnny had started, joining us in July, and we take a ton of time to like really get that place right and do a lot of things to. I mean, we work really hard throughout the year.
yeah, we do.
You've earned the 500 photographs. You've earned that time when you're butchering to take your time and get every morsel of meat that you possibly can.
Yep.
You've earned that time to not speed yourself up and not and not just try to fly through because you're a little bit extra tired. It's
Mm-hmm.
like these are the moments that you've worked really hard for. And if you got to put the knife down, take a step back and take a breather and just appreciate that moment, do so that you can butcher and get the animal in the right way. When you're talking about photographs, it just sort of reminded me of those moments too. Like
Yeah.
when last thing you want to do is just rush through that moment.
Well,
You want
I,
to.
I think we did that. Like
Oh,
we
we
ended
did.
up
Yeah,
like
yeah.
stepping back and having the cigar for a second,
Oh, yeah,
relighting it
yeah.
back up, and just being like, that just happened. Like,
Well, that's what we do anyway. I mean, like
yeah, you and I, yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'm a little slower. I do take I'm slower than the average person on butchering, but there is a part of me that's not only trying to butcher in a very precise way, but I'm also like, that's a moment that I cherish. It's like this is only happening a few times a year. This meat is going into a freezer that I'll enjoy with my family, and I worked my ass off to be in this moment.
Yeah.
And it is a very earned moment in that year.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so you have to remember that. And so that extra 5-10 minutes to maybe pull the rib meat or like get the rib meat the right way. I'm just throwing out an example. I mean, like
Yeah.
it's worth
Yeah.
it. It's worth
It
it.
is.
You've earned that.
Yes. Yes.
It's
No,
not
it's
a
it's
it's
so
definitely not
true.
a chore. It's a reward, to
It
be in that
is.
moment with that animal in that way. And it's a reward to be able to take pictures and just cherish it in whatever way you possibly can.
Yep. No, I mean, I fully agree. I mean, I did something too where I took I got a shoulder mount done
Hmm.
of this doe, and
Yeah.
probably by the time this podcast come out, it will be including when the article comes out and stuff too, because I kind of want to have it all kind of at the same time, so probably be around then. And then that that was something that the whenever you get a shoulder mount done, you have to basically remove the hide in a particular way. But then I
Yeah.
had all the rest of it, so I took the time myself to remove the back half basically of the hide with the legs and everything all together. And so it was something that before I kind of cut out swatches, and I was like, they send it to the tannery to where I have these little, maybe 18 by 20 inch, kind of sections and stuff of that. And I had many of them. And, but this one I was like, well, let's see if I can get the largest piece. So I got that
Yeah.
out, and it took the time to do that because I was like, this is a twice in a lifetime opportunity,
Yeah.
but it really is one of those kinds of things that's so exceedingly rare that I was like,
Hmm.
I want to get every single piece of this hide that I can get to the tannery that I can be able to keep. And that's like, whatever I'm going to do with that, I don't know, whatever that is. It's like,
Yeah.
even if it's just something that's laid out someday on a table or whatever, or put on the wall, or, made into part of a pillow or whatever it is. Like, I just wanted to take I did not want to waste a single piece of that hide at all.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I took the time to do it, and it took me longer. But at the end, whenever that last piece was on, I was like, that was awesome.
Yeah.
So neat. In
It's
fact,
worth it.
that's
I mean,
one of the things we had done. with the previous deer. I'm going to try not to break everything here behind me. Is I took the tail, and that was the one from 2006,
That's
16.
cool. Yeah.
And so this was the only bit of white that was on, or any other, coloration of, it was just that underside of that tail. And the same thing with the doe. There's just a little fleck of white here, even less than this one here. But the B&B taxidermy, I was like, what can you do with the tail? He's like, I can make like a horse whip. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but yeah, let's try it out. So he's like, I've done this a couple times. So he's like, why don't you try that out? But yeah, anyway, that's the coloration, for those who just kind of want to see that visual. It's like, it's very, very dark. And it's even darker than this one, I think, than that tail there too. Because that was a little bit lighter on the tail. But anyway, that was one amazing day, and I'm just so incredibly thankful. It feels like almost all the work that we put in, like that reward of those experiences just feels richer. And to be able to kind of talk about it and share it with my friends is the most incredible experience. And then to be able to share that with my family and friends is, just, it's all part of it, man. And I think we're just so blessed to have these experiences. I'm reading a book right now by Rick Rubin, talking about, creative arts and artistry. And it talks about like how every single time you go to whatever your craft is that you're doing, whatever you're creating, whatever your artistry, and in fact, just your experiences in life, sometimes try to go and look at something through the lens of it being the first time ever. How would you experience this the first time? And I think that that's something that I kind of taking back into, this hunting season, is every time I go out in the woods, I want to try to act like it's almost like my first time, and really trying to be eyes open to that thing. And really, as I've been letting myself into that mindset, just how lucky and blessed I feel to be able to have that experience. Because there will be a day that you and I will step into the woods to hunt for the last time. And I don't know when that is.
I don't know either, but I think about it. And that's what you're talking about.
That's exactly it. Be conscious enough to realize where you are. And that's where that whole Markinian idea too. It's like, you're there, take those pictures, take that extra time.
Absolutely.
Step back, pause, look at the sunset while you're, field dressing your deer, whatever it is, like, take it all in. And I think when we do, we realize that this is a way of life we want to preserve, we want to conserve, we want to pass it on to future generations, because there is such a connectivity of being able to put that wild, game, that wild meat, that experience into our lives, and kind of touching back to something that connects to our ancestral ways and how we arrived here where we are today. So it's a full 360 richness. And man, I can't wait for us to get back out in the woods and do this again. And we'll talk about that next set of experiences that we're lucky to have.
It's going to be great. Can't wait.
Hey, man, thanks for joining today. Hope everyone enjoyed it. Guys, tune in. Make sure if you haven't, go like, subscribe, leave some comments. Let's talk about these things. You got any questions on this? We're happy to answer them. We love, communicating back and forth with this. And if you have any guests that you think that we should be interviewing, let us know. Okay. So throw them in the comments below. Thank you once again, everybody. And thank you, Matthew Mitchell. We'll talk soon.
Of course. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.